It was my first year of university, and I had just finished unpacking the last of my boxes, the room still echoing with the quiet rustle of empty bags as my family's footsteps faded down the hallway. The air smelled faintly of cardboard and the crisp scent of new bedding, a moment that should have felt like a fresh start. Later that same day, my roommate finally showed up. From the instant he stepped into the room, I could tell something was off about him. This kid was, without question, the most socially awkward person I had ever met. I stood up and stuck out my hand, giving him a friendly grin. "Hey, I'm Dan," I said. He paused, his eyes dropping to my hand, staring at it like he was trying to figure out what exactly it was. For a moment he didn't move, and the silence stretched uncomfortably. Then he let out this weird forced laugh and went, "Oh," before reaching out and giving me the limpest, coldest handshake I've ever received, his hand barely curling around mine like a dead fish. I had to ask him for his name because he didn't even bother to tell me when we shook hands. He blinked a couple of times and said, "Dale." Trying to ease the tension, I started some small talk, asking him where he was from, what he was studying, anything to break the silence. But all he gave me were flat yes or no answers, occasionally forcing out an awkward laugh or a tight, uncomfortable smile, like he was mimicking how he thought a person should respond. Within minutes, the conversation died, and the room fell into a heavy, suffocating quiet. We both ended up sitting on our beds, the glow of our laptop screens painting pale light across our faces, not saying a word, just tapping on our keyboards while the silence filled every corner. A wave of disappointment sank into me as I realized I'd have to live with this for the rest of the year. I was already planning to request a different roommate. Anyone but Dale. Anyone would be better, I thought. At that point, I believed Dale was just another painfully awkward kid. But I was wrong. He was so much more than that, and I was about to find out just how wrong I was. I had met some of the other kids on my floor, and thankfully they seemed pretty cool, which gave me a small sense of relief about being here. That first night, after wandering around campus and getting a feel for the place, I came back to the dorm, pushing open the door quietly. Dale was still there, sitting in the exact same position he had been in when I left earlier. His posture hadn't changed, his eyes locked on his laptop screen, the pale glow of it painting his face in the dim room. It was like he hadn't moved at all, hadn't even blinked. I tried to keep things normal, to push down the creeping weirdness in my gut. "What's up, Dale?" I said, tossing my keys on the desk. He didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. Honestly, I wasn't that surprised at this point. It was 9:30, and I didn't really have anything else to do, so I decided to call it a night. I clicked off the lamp on my side of the room, the darkness swallowing half the space, leaving only the cold blue glow from Dale's laptop lighting the other half like a strange nightlight. I lay in bed, pulling the thin blanket up around me, but there was no way I was falling asleep anytime soon. I could hear the quiet clicking of Dale's keyboard, the soft hum of his laptop fan, the occasional rustle as he shifted, all while the screen's glow flickered faintly against the ceiling. It felt like the room was holding its breath with me, trapped in that soft, eerie light. He stayed like that until 3 in the morning, the keys softly clicking and pausing in an odd, uneven rhythm, until he finally closed the laptop with a quiet click that felt way too loud in the silence. It wasn't long after that before I drifted off, the tension in my body finally giving out. But within the hour, I jolted awake, an uneasy chill washing over me. The blinds, which we had kept closed, were now pulled open, and the moonlight was pouring in through the window, casting cold, silvery light across the room. It washed over everything, the desks, the floor, and the beds, making every detail in the dark sharp and visible. And there, sitting on the edge of his bed, was Dale. Just sitting there, facing me, his pale face half lit by the moonlight, staring. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. "Dale, what the hell are you doing?" I managed to say, my voice low and uncertain. For a moment, he didn't move, just kept staring. Then, in a barely there whisper that seemed to scrape the quiet, he replied, "Sorry," before slowly lying back down. But I couldn't shake the way he said it, or the way his eyes had looked in that moonlight, following me until the moment he turned away. The next morning, I woke up to find that Dale was already gone. It felt like it was the first time he had actually left the room, and the empty space where his presence usually lingered made the air feel lighter for a moment. It was Saturday, the first Saturday of the year, which meant orientation day, packed with campus tours, small group activities, and all the typical welcome festivities meant to make us feel excited about college. I tried to focus on that, telling myself I could start fresh, meet people, and shake off the strangeness that had already started to cling to my new life here. During the orientation, as my group was walking past the campus gardens, I heard a couple of students ahead of me whispering. One of them leaned closer to the other and said, "What is that kid doing in there?" Their voices carried just enough for me to catch. Curious, I shifted to see what they were talking about, and my stomach dropped when I saw him. It was Dale. He was literally sitting in the dirt behind a patch of bushes, hidden partially by leaves, his knees tucked awkwardly against his chest. His hand was outstretched, slowly rubbing the rough bark of a tree, tracing the grooves with a strange, focused intensity. His eyes were locked on the tree, and there was something unsettling about the way he moved his hand, slowly, back and forth, as if he was trying to feel something that wasn't there. The orientation leader didn't notice, too busy guiding us along the path and talking about the history of the garden. I was sure if she had seen, she would have stopped and said something, but she kept walking, and so did everyone else. I just kept moving, pretending not to see him, my steps quickening as I passed. The two students I had overheard glanced back, clearly unsure of what to think. On impulse, I turned to them and said, He's my roommate." I let out a dry, uneasy laugh, trying to use it as a way to start a conversation, maybe even to make a couple of friends out of this weird situation. They looked at me, their eyes wide, and one of them said, "Oh man, sorry." The other added, "Yeah, sorry about that." None of us really knew if it was appropriate to laugh, but after a moment of awkward silence, we all did, the laughter coming out strained but real enough to break the tension. Despite how strange the morning had started, it turned out to be a good day. I ended up making friends with those two kids, and we made plans to meet up that night to hang out, something casual to ease into the school year. And when I got back to my dorm later that day, I found out that the school had found another roommate for me. Just like that, Dale would be moving out, and I'd be getting someone new. For the first time since arriving, it felt like things were finally turning around, shifting quickly towards something better, and I let myself feel relieved, at least for the moment. That night, I left the room to meet up with the two kids I'd met earlier. It felt good to step outside and breathe for a bit, to forget about Dale for just a few hours and feel normal, laughing and talking like everything was fine. But when I got back to the dorm, I opened the door to find Dale sitting in the desk chair, directly facing the door, like he had been waiting there, motionless in the dark, except for the faint glow of the hallway light behind me. His eyes locked on mine the instant I stepped in. "Oh, hey, what's up?" I said, trying to keep my voice casual, even though the sight of him sitting there sent a small shiver down my spine. "Nothing," he said, flat and matter-of-fact, his voice sounding almost robotic, like he was repeating a phrase he had practiced. I walked past him, the tension prickling at the back of my neck, and sat down on my bed, flipping open my laptop to distract myself. But the moment the screen lit up, I felt a wave of cold realization wash over me. I had forgotten to lock it before I left. As I scanned the screen, I noticed that all of my emails had been opened, emails I was pretty sure I hadn't even read yet. I clicked around and found that a bunch of my folders had been opened too, random ones that I hadn't touched in weeks. It was clear Dale had been snooping through my laptop while I was out. I turned my head toward him, forcing myself to stay calm, and asked, "Dale, did you go through my computer while I was gone?" Before I even finished the question, he snapped, "No!" The word came out loud and sharp, way too fast, like it had been waiting on the tip of his tongue. I could read him like a book. This creepy kid had been going through my stuff while I was out, digging through my personal life. But I didn't push it any further. I could feel my jaw tighten, but I swallowed the anger down. There was no point. I just needed to get through one more night, and I'd be out of here forever by tomorrow. I was ready to go to bed, so I leaned over to grab my pajamas from under my pillow. But the moment I opened my drawer, I froze. My clothes felt wrong, like they had been moved around, folded and shifted in a way I hadn't left them. The familiar scent of my laundry was mixed with something else, something faintly metallic and off, clinging to the fabric like stale air. I didn't say anything. I just got changed quietly, forcing myself not to look at Dale, who was still sitting there, staring, before finally moving to his bed. Later that night, I woke up to a sound that snapped me out of sleep instantly, a quiet but sharp zip, slicing through the silence of the dark room. I sat up in bed, the blankets falling from my shoulders, and saw Dale crouched on the floor, rummaging through my bag, the moonlight catching the slight movement of his hands as he unzipped pockets and pushed things around, searching for something. This time, I reached over and switched on the lamp, the light flooding the room harshly, making Dale squint as he froze, caught in the act. "What the hell are you doing, Dale?" I demanded, my voice low and shaking, a mix of anger and fear rising in my chest. He looked up at me with that same empty stare and said, "I think you have my toothbrush by mistake." His voice was calm, too calm, and the words came out as if he was trying to sound casual, but it only made it worse. It was the closest thing to cleverness I'd seen from him since I met him, but even then, I knew he was lying. I could see it in the slight twitch of his jaw, the way his eyes darted away from mine for just a second. And in that moment, sitting there in the harsh glow of the lamp, with Dale still crouched over my bag, I knew something was wrong with him, something deeply wrong. I felt it in the pit of my stomach. But I couldn't get physical with him. I couldn't risk it. Not when it felt like there was something about him that I didn't fully understand, something that made the air in the room feel heavy, like it was pressing down on me, warning me to stay still. The next day, I met my new roommate. He was in the same building, which made the move easier, and everything went smoothly. It felt like a weight had been lifted, like I could finally breathe again. Sunday night came, and after having a decent conversation with my new roommate, who, while not exactly a social butterfly, was miles better than Dale, we both decided to call it a night. We turned off our lights, the room falling into a comfortable darkness, and settled in to sleep. But for the third night in a row, I found myself waking up at some off hour, my body stirring from a restless sleep without knowing why at first. Then I heard it, a strange noise in the silence of the room. It was a weird clicking sound, soft but sharp enough to catch my attention in the quiet. It wasn't consistent, but every 20 or 30 seconds it would come again. A quick, tiny click, then silence, then another click. I got up slowly, hoping it was something harmless. Maybe a heavy bag shifting on a weak floorboard, or even a mouse scuttling around looking for crumbs. Something normal, something easy to ignore. But as I quietly moved around the room, listening, I realized the sound wasn't coming from inside. It was coming from the other side of the door. The hallway outside always had a nightlight on, casting a dull glow into the common area. I crept closer, careful not to make the floor creak under my feet, and leaned in to look through the peephole. What I saw made my breath catch in my throat. Standing on the other side of our door, so close that the top of their head was all I could see, was someone. Their scalp was visible in the circle of the pee-hole, but their head was angled downward, hiding their face from view. They weren't moving much, just standing there in the glow of the hallway light. Now that I was paying attention, I realized the tiny clicking noises were coming from the doorknob. I could see the slight, almost imperceptible movement as the knob twisted, stopped, then twisted again, over and over, the sound sharp in the silence. Whoever it was, they were trying to unlock our door. A cold, hollow fear settled in my chest as I stepped back, my mind immediately jumping to the only person it could be. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed the campus police department, whispering my location as quietly as I could. They told me to stay put and that they'd be there as soon as possible. Those few minutes felt like hours, the clicking continuing on the other side of the door, steady and patient, as if whoever was there wasn't in any rush, as if they knew I was inside, listening, and they didn't care. Finally, I heard footsteps and saw the blue flash of lights through the edges of the window. I heard voices outside in the hallway, firm and commanding, and the clicking stopped. Only then did I feel safe enough to unlock and open the door, my hand still shaking as I turned the deadbolt. Standing in the common room were the officers, and between them, in handcuffs, was Dale. I had a feeling it was him the moment I heard that clicking. I told the officers everything, that he was my former roommate, that I had caught him going through my stuff, that I switched dorms because of him, only to find him here, trying to break into my new room in the middle of the night. They nodded, taking it all down, and then they led him away, his head still bowed, his eyes fixed on the floor. I don't know what happened to him after that. I never saw him again. Maybe he was suspended for the semester, or maybe they expelled him. Either way, he was gone. I got through the rest of my years at university like anybody else, going to classes, making friends, living the life I had come here to live. But every now and then, especially on quiet nights, the memory of Dale standing on the other side of the door, slowly twisting the knob in the dark, comes back to me. And when it does, I can't help but feel that same cold fear crawl up my spine all over again. I went to Binghamton University for 2 years, and it didn't take long for me to build a big group of friends there. We'd go out almost every weekend, exploring, partying, or just hanging out wherever we could find a spot away from prying eyes. One weekend, on a Friday night in October, our group didn't have any big plans together, so it ended up being just me and 2 of my close friends looking for something to do. We decided to head out to the school nature preserve by the lake. There was this little clearing on the far side of the lake, a tucked-away spot that was perfect for fires since it was so far out of sight from the school and campus security. Every now and then, kids would come out there to smoke pot, drink, or mess around with other drugs, but it was still a relatively unknown place on campus, and we liked that about it. It was our little secret corner, a place where we could just be ourselves, away from the noise. That night, we kept it simple. We brought a bunch of beers, lit a small fire, and sat around it, the flames crackling softly as the orange glow flickered across our faces. We were having what we called a bro chat, the kind of conversations that felt deep and important under the stars, with the cold October air biting at our cheeks and the warmth of the fire licking our hands. As the night wore on, time seemed to slip by faster, the beer working its way into our systems, making everything a little softer around the edges, a little funnier, a little louder. We were laughing so hard at one point that one of my friends ended up rolling on the ground, leaves sticking to his hoodie as he clutched his stomach. That was when my other friend suddenly stopped laughing and put a finger to his lips. "Shh," he said, his eyes shifting toward the dark line of trees. We all froze, our laughter caught in our throats as we listened. The fire popped softly, the cold breeze rustled the leaves, and then we heard it. The faint crunching of leaves and snapping of branches somewhere in the darkness, deeper in the woods. Without a word, we scrambled. We knew we were all under 21, and while it wasn't super common, it also wasn't unheard of for campus police to come through the woods on weekends looking to catch kids doing drugs or drinking. We tossed our beer bottles into the lake, the soft splashes echoing in the cold air, and quickly packed the rest of the beers into a backpack, shoving it closed with shaking hands. I was moderately drunk, the edges of my thoughts fuzzy, but the fear sharpened everything, my heart thumping faster in my chest. I could tell the others felt it too, the alcohol amplifying the paranoia, making every sound feel closer, every crack of a branch in the dark sound like footsteps. We stood there for a moment, the fire flickering low, our breaths visible in the cold, waiting to see if the sounds would come closer. The fire was the only real light in the darkness, and it left us completely exposed to anyone passing through the woods. But the thing was, this spot was so hidden, so deep into the preserve and far from campus, that it was rare for anyone else to come out this way. That was part of why we loved it. But now, in the dark, with the fire casting long, shifting shadows against the trees, The sound of footsteps somewhere out there didn't feel comforting. It sounded like just one person, moving in the distance, the leaves crunching softly underfoot, followed by a sudden snap of a tree branch not too far away. All of us froze. The snap echoed in the cold air, sending a jolt of fear through each of us. None of us were the confrontational types from our group. We didn't have that one fearless friend who would stand up, cup his hands around his mouth, and yell out into the darkness, demanding to know who was there. Instead, we just sat there, our laughter from earlier now gone, replaced by an uneasy silence. Every time one of us tried to whisper, we ended up shushing each other, afraid that even the sound of our voices might draw whoever or whatever was out there closer. We kept hearing it, the footsteps, the leaves crunching, the quiet crack of branches shifting under weight. It was like someone or something was circling us, moving in a wide, deliberate arc around our little campsite, slow and steady, like it was watching us. The way the sounds moved around us, the way they would stop and then start again on the other side, it started to feel like we were in a scene from the Blair Witch Project. The darkness was thick around the edges of the firelight, the sounds just beyond what we could see, every quiet crackle or rustle echoing back to us, making it impossible to tell how close they really were. At first, we tried to laugh it off, tossing out nervous jokes about raccoons or deer, but each time the sounds returned, the laughter died faster. My heart was pounding, and I felt the fear building in my chest, tight and cold, as I wondered who or what was out there, hiding in the darkness just beyond the glow of our fire. And then, out of nowhere, a huge thud made all three of us jump to our feet, the suddenness of it tearing through the silence. At first, I didn't understand what had happened. I saw it, but it took a few seconds for my brain to catch up, to process what I was looking at. A thick tree branch, bigger than any of us would have tried to mess with for firewood, was lying in the dirt, right in the center of our little campsite. Steam rising faintly from the cold as it settled into the leaves. It had been thrown there, hard enough to send leaves scattering, the end of it smoldering where it had touched the edge of our fire. Someone had thrown it, someone strong enough, close enough, and angry enough to hurl a heavy branch into the middle of our circle without saying a word. And in that moment, the fear stopped being just a creeping unease. It was real, immediate, and it was staring at us from the darkness. The moment that branch crashed into the middle of our campsite, everything changed. One of my two friends didn't wait around to figure out what was going on. He just took off running, disappearing into the dark woods with the sound of crunching leaves trailing behind him. My other friend and I stayed behind for a moment, staring at each other across the flickering firelight, our eyes wide, our faces twisted in these half-laughs, half-concerned looks. It was like we were stuck between wanting to believe it was some kind of prank and the rising fear that it wasn't. Then, before either of us could say a word, my friend suddenly let out a sharp, painful scream that cut through the cold night air. I saw him stumble backward, clutching his face, and that's when I saw the second tree branch bounce off the ground, rolling to a stop near the fire. It had hit him. Someone had thrown it hard enough to strike him in the face. That was it. Any illusion that this was a joke shattered instantly.
I grabbed the backpack, my hands fumbling with the straps, and helped my friend up off the ground, leaves sticking to his clothes and the side of his face where he'd been hit. We didn't even look back at the fire or the woods. We just ran. We tore through the trees, the cold air burning in our lungs, our feet pounding against the dirt path as we headed in the direction of our dorm. The darkness swallowed everything outside the narrow beam of my phone flashlight, shadows shifting and dancing with every step. When we finally made it to the road that separated the nature preserve from campus, we stopped for a second, bending over and gasping for air, trying to catch our breath. The road felt like a lifeline, the glow of distant streetlights, a reminder that safety was close. But whoever had been out there wasn't done. From the darkness of the trees behind us, we heard footsteps crunching closer, slow and deliberate, closing the distance to the road, as if whoever was out there wanted us to know they were still following. We didn't wait to see who it was. We took off again, running the last stretch back to the dorm, the sounds of our frantic footsteps echoing in the cold October air. When we finally burst through the doors and made it up to our floor, we found our other friend already in his room, sitting on the edge of his bed, wide-eyed, still catching his breath. Together, we went to his window and looked out toward the woods, the trees' dark outlines against the faint glow of the sky. Down by the edge of the woods, we could see someone, a figure pacing back and forth just at the tree line, moving slowly, turning back and forth like they were waiting for something. Every time a car passed on the road, the figure would slip back into the shadows of the trees, hiding just beyond the headlights. Then, when the road was empty again, they'd return to pacing, their dark shape shifting against the lighter background of the leaves. Eventually, after what felt like forever, the figure turned and walked back into the woods for good, swallowed by the darkness, and we never saw them again. Once it was clear, we closed the blinds, shut the door, and cracked open the remaining beers. We tried to shake it off, continuing our drinking session there in the dorm room, letting the warmth of the alcohol fight off the chill of fear still clinging to us. Within 10 minutes, we were all laughing about it again, cracking jokes, trying to convince ourselves it was just some random weirdo or a stupid prank by someone who had found our spot. But it wasn't until the next morning, when we woke up and talked about it again with clear heads, that we realized how terrifying that experience actually was. How close we had been to something or someone in those woods, alone in the dark. After that night, we never really went back into the woods after dark again. This happened during the first week of school, my freshman year at the University of Iowa. It was that weird transition period where you're trying to get comfortable with everything, your classes, your schedule, your roommate, and I was just starting to get used to the guy I was sharing a room with. He was dead set on rushing a fraternity. Rush Week was starting the following week, but the parties were already kicking off by Thursday of that first week, and he wasn't about to miss out. The thing was, he didn't want to go alone. He said it would be harder to meet people that way, harder to blend in, and he wanted me to come with him. I didn't mind. I wasn't interested in rushing a fraternity, but I had come to a party school, and I definitely wasn't going to pass up on going to some parties. His plan was to hit one frat party on Thursday night and then bounce around to different frat houses on Friday and Saturday, testing the waters and getting his face out there before Rush officially started.
So that Thursday night, we headed out. We were going to what was probably one of the lowest ranked frats on campus. I'm pretty sure it was an underground one too. But his logic was that it was good to have a backup frat in case the higher tier houses didn't offer him a bid. He figured if the big frats passed him over, at least this one might take him in. The frat house was far, way off campus, in a downtown area that felt rough around the edges, with cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights that buzzed overhead. The neighborhood felt like it was clinging to the last scraps of the night, quiet and almost eerie, if not for the distant thump of bass we could hear as we got closer. We pulled up to a corner house, and if it weren't for the blasting music and the cars jammed into every available space along the street, we would have never guessed it was a frat house. The place looked run down, like they had just grabbed the first house they could find and called it good enough. The paint was peeling, and the front porch light flickered as people moved in and out, solo cups in hand. We knocked on the door, the bass from the speakers inside vibrating the wood under my knuckles, and it swung open almost immediately. Standing there was this short, chubby guy in a white t-shirt holding a red solo cup. His shirt had dark sweat stains under his armpits and a big patch of sweat around his belly, clinging to him in the harsh light spilling from inside the house. He grinned a little too wide and said, "Come on in," waving us inside without even asking who we were. And just like that, we stepped into the house, the music hitting us like a wave as we crossed the threshold. The party itself was packed into this horribly dimly lit room that felt like it hadn't seen daylight in years. The living room was crammed with at least 50 guys, all bunched up shoulder to shoulder, moving in slow waves as they tried to navigate through the heat and the music. And it was hot, miserably hot. The air was thick with sweat and the sour smell of cheap beer, clinging to your skin and making it feel like you couldn't breathe fully. To make it even worse, I think I saw maybe 2 girls at the entire party, and neither of them were anywhere close to attractive. They just hovered in the corner, looking as uncomfortable as I felt, clutching their drinks and avoiding eye contact with everyone. I gave the party a good 20 minutes trying to tough it out, moving from one awkward conversation to another. It felt like every person I tried to talk to was an overweight foreigner who gave off these weird antisocial vibes, mumbling short answers and glancing around like they were waiting for something. Eventually, I caught my roommate's eye and waved at him, signaling that I was ready to leave. He nodded, but when we looked toward the door, a huge group of guys was standing there, packed in tight, laughing loudly and blocking the only exit. We exchanged a look and decided it was better to wait a little longer, just to avoid the awkwardness of trying to shove our way out and looking like we were bailing too early. So, I kept drinking, grabbing the cheap beers they were serving, hoping to speed up the buzz enough to make the situation bearable. I think I downed 5 cups before I could even feel anything, the warm liquid going down like water, leaving that cheap metallic aftertaste on my tongue. Then this heavy guy approached me, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt, and he was holding this tiny bottle in his hand. He smirked and shoved it toward me, saying, "That'll get you shit-faced." I let out a fake laugh, forcing a smile, and thanked him, hoping he'd take the hint and walk away. But he didn't. He just stood there, eyes locked on me, waiting for me to drink it. So I did. I twisted off the cap and downed it in one go.
It was maybe 2 shots worth of some hard liquor, burning down my throat and hitting my stomach like a fist. The guy's smirk widened, and he started talking to me, launching into this one-sided conversation about God knows what. Every time I tried to step away, hinting that I was done talking, he would shuffle closer, pulling me back in with another question or a laugh, his breath sour and heavy in the hot air. And then, things started to get blurry. It was like the edges of the room were darkening, the noise of the party fading into a dull underwater thump. My head felt heavy, and a wave of dizziness rolled through me, forcing me to grab the back of a couch to steady myself. The last thing I remember was the room spinning, the lights overhead smearing into long, dark streaks as everything around me got darker and darker. And then nothing, until I woke up in a dark room, lying on a bed. I could hear the sound of music, muffled and distant, thumping behind closed doors, so I knew I was still in the frat house. The bass pounded through the walls like a dull heartbeat, reminding me that the party was still going on somewhere nearby. The room I was in, though, was dark, very dark. My eyes struggled to adjust as I lay there, blinking away the haze that still clouded my head. Slowly, I could make out the shapes of some furniture: a desk, a chair with clothes draped over it, and a small closet door in the corner. Other than that, there wasn't much else to see, just shadows swallowing everything that the faint light from under the door couldn't reach. But even over the blaring, muffled music, I heard it. A faint, sharp crinkle. The sound of a plastic bag being stepped on, the quick crunch of it breaking the silence inside that dark room. It was coming from the closet. Someone was in there, standing there, hiding just a few feet away. That was all I needed. Adrenaline shot through me, shoving aside the lingering dizziness, and I jumped up, stumbling a little as I moved, and ran out of that room without looking back. I tore down the stairs, the music getting louder with every step until it was pounding in my ears, and I pushed my way back into the overcrowded living room, the sweaty air and noise swallowing me instantly. I scanned the crowd frantically, my eyes darting over the faces, until I found my roommate standing off to the side. Without a word, I grabbed him by the arm and pushed him toward the front door, shoving past the same group of guys who were still standing in a circle by the entrance, laughing and talking, completely unaware of what was happening. We burst out into the cool night air, leaving the heat, the noise, and that house behind us. During the car ride back to campus, I finally spoke, my voice shaky as I told my roommate I was drugged. He almost pulled out his phone right then to call the cops, but I stopped him. I told him it would be foolish, pointless even. We both knew nothing would come of it, and I just wanted to get as far away from that house as possible. Then he asked me an awkward question, his voice quiet in the dark car. "Were you taken advantage of?" I paused, the question hanging in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. I thought about it, replaying the moment I woke up, the way I felt. I didn't feel any pain. My clothes were still on, exactly the same as before. So I told him, "No, I don't think so." When I checked the time, I realized I had only been out for maybe 10 minutes before waking up in that dark room. Whatever that guy gave me must have been a dud, or maybe it hadn't worked the way he planned. Thank God. That was my college experience of attending an underground ghetto frat party. It was supposed to be just another Thursday night, a stupid party I didn't even want to go to. And it ended up being the scariest experience of my life. I had a single dorm during the first semester of my sophomore year. It was tucked away in the corner of the floor, kind of secluded from the rest of the dorm rooms since it sat in its own little section. You had to turn a corner just to even see the door, which made it feel hidden, like my own little pocket of privacy. I liked it that way. It meant I could still talk with friends on my floor, invite people over to hang out whenever I wanted, but when it was time to do homework or crash for the night, I could shut the world out and have the space to myself. A few weeks into the semester, while I was sitting at my desk studying for a bio exam, the usual silence of my tucked-away room was broken by a noise. It was so faint at first, it didn't even register right away. Just a light tapping on the door, so soft it almost blended in with the hum of the dorm building. At first, I ignored it, flipping through my notes, but then it came again. So faint, it made me pause. "Come in," I yelled, not wanting to get up. But the door didn't open. The tapping stopped, leaving the room in silence once again. With a sigh, I got up and crossed the small room, swinging the door open. Nobody was there. I stepped out into the hallway, turning the corner to look down the main hall of the floor. But it was empty, lit only by the quiet glow of the overhead lights. The doors were all closed, and the hallway felt still, too still. Someone was clearly messing with me. I went back to my room, a small unease scratching at the back of my mind, but I sat back down on my bed and continued studying, this time leaving the door propped open, waiting to see if whoever it was would come back. But nobody came back that night. The next night, a few minutes after I had shut off the lamp on my desk and climbed into bed, the tapping returned. Only this time, it was louder. It wasn't a soft tapping anymore. It was more like a knock, firm enough to echo faintly in my small room. I sat up, blinking into the darkness. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice sharp in the quiet. Again, the knocking stopped, cutting off so suddenly it left a ringing silence in its place. Nobody answered. Frustration and a creeping unease made me throw off my blanket, and I quickly got out of bed, crossing the room in a few fast steps to yank the door open. The small private corridor outside my room was empty, the shadows stretching down the hall untouched. I stepped out, the floor cold under my feet, and ran the 10 feet from my door to the corner, turning sharply to look down the main hallway of the floor. Nobody. Not a single person in sight. The hallway lights buzzed softly, and the doors lining the walls remained shut, the quiet pressing in around me. The next morning, I asked some of the other kids in the dorm if they had been messing with me, hoping to catch a grin, a laugh, something to explain the knocking. But everyone I asked said no, and the way some of them looked at me, I could tell they weren't lying. The next night, I woke up after having been asleep for about 3 hours. My room was dark, the faint glow from the clock on my desk the only light cutting through the shadows. And then I heard it. Someone was knocking on my door again. But this time it was louder than ever, a heavy pounding that rattled in the silence of my room, making my heart thump harder with every hit. The sound echoed off the walls, filling the small space with an uncomfortable, hollow rhythm. I lay there for a moment, frozen, the blankets pulled up to my chest, caught in that half-awake, half-afraid daze, trying to decide whether I should open the door or not. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, but a surge of adrenaline pushed past the fear, giving me a sudden, shaky courage. With a deep breath, I threw the blankets off and hopped up, crossing the room in a few quick strides. My hand hesitated on the doorknob for just a second before I yanked the door open. Nobody was there, just like I had expected. But this time, I didn't just stand there. I felt the fear twist into frustration, and without thinking, I full-on sprinted down the tiny corridor that isolated my room, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor as I ran. I turned the corner sharply, my breath caught in my throat, and I saw the back of someone disappearing around the far corner on the opposite side of the hallway, their dark silhouette moving fast. I didn't stop. I ran as fast as I could down the hallway, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing softly, the stale dorm air rushing past me. My heart pounded in my ears as I reached the end of the hallway and turned the corner where I had seen the person vanish just seconds earlier. At the end of this hallway, I saw a door slowly shutting, the handle clicking softly into place. It wasn't a dorm room. It was a bathroom. Something inside me snapped into focus. I was done with this. I was ready to confront whoever this joker was, ready to see who was messing with me night after night. I charged forward and pushed the bathroom door open with force, the hinges creaking loudly as it swung inward, slamming against the wall. The light was off, the dark interior of the bathroom swallowing the glow from the hallway behind me. I reached over and flipped the switch, the fluorescent light flickering to life with a hum, flooding the bathroom with a harsh, cold light. I scanned the room, expecting to see someone hiding behind the sinks or pressed against the tiled walls, but the bathroom appeared empty. My eyes darted to the 2 bathroom stalls, both of them shut, their doors hanging just above the floor, casting dark shadows underneath. My first instinct was to check. I dropped down onto my hands and knees, the cold tiles pressing against my palms, and leaned forward, lowering my head to look under the gaps at the bottom of the stalls. And that's when I saw them. 2 heavy black boots planted firmly on the floor, facing forward, visible just beneath the door of one of the stalls. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in my hands, and pushed the stall door open. It swung inward with a low creak, the fluorescent light flickering slightly above me as I stared inside. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. There, on the floor, were the boots, the same heavy black boots I had seen under the stall door, positioned exactly where I had seen them. But there was no one there to wear them. They were just sitting there, empty, upright, like someone had stepped out of them and vanished into thin air. My confusion twisted into something colder, sharper, as a sound cut through the stillness of the bathroom. A giggling noise. But it wasn't the giggle of a child or the soft, airy laugh of a woman. It was something else, something far worse. It was the kind of laugh I could only imagine coming from a really old, crazy man. It was low, cracked, the sound of it bouncing off the bathroom tiles, making it impossible to tell exactly where it was coming from. And it was close. All the confidence I had felt a moment earlier evaporated instantly, draining out of me and leaving behind a raw, icy fear that rooted me to the spot. For a second, I couldn't move. My eyes stayed locked on the empty boots, the sound of that horrible giggling wrapping around me, sinking into my bones. Then I snapped. I turned and bolted out of the bathroom, the door slamming shut behind me as I sprinted back down the hallway, the lights overhead blurring past as I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my room, nearly slamming into the door as I shoved it open and slammed it shut behind me, twisting the lock with trembling fingers. I dove back into my bed, pulling the covers around me like a shield, my chest heaving as I grabbed my phone and started texting every friend I had. Anyone.
I needed someone to respond, someone to tell me I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't alone. But of course, it was the middle of the night and everyone was asleep. The messages sat there, unread, the silence of the room pressing in around me. Then the knocking came again. Louder than before, pounding against the door, the rhythm uneven, almost impatient. I froze, staring at the door from my bed, my phone clutched in my hand. I didn't move, didn't breathe, trying to will the knocking to stop. It kept going, steady, for what felt like forever, 30 seconds of relentless pounding before it finally stopped. Whoever it was, they finally gave up. The next day, I talked to everyone on my floor, trying to piece together what was happening, hoping that someone else had heard it, that it wasn't just me. But nobody else heard any knocking, and everyone I spoke to swore they weren't pranking me. Their faces were sincere, their confusion real, and that only made it worse. I don't know why this person chose to harass me, or who it was. But judging by the boots and the laughter I heard, this wasn't a kid, and it wasn't someone playing around. It was an older man, and that thought still disturbs me.